The U.S. Air Force is reversing a decision to remove the history of the Tuskegee Airmen from the military branch's training courses. The Tuskegee Airmen were the nation's first black military pilots. Under President Trump's ban on federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, lesson plans on the Tuskegee Airmen, along with the history of women Air Force service pilots, would have been pulled from U.S. Air Force training courses. However, the decision was reversed following public backlash. The new Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth even weighed in, posting on X that the decision has been immediately reversed.
You're missing the point, Pete. You don't get to pick and choose what contributions in American military history should be taught and not taught. You teach all of it. It's a slap in the face. My wife's grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman, so this is real personal for me, okay? And I got to know that man very well before he passed away. The amount of crap that he went through trying to love a country that wouldn't love him back, and you're going to sit there and tell me, well, that's DEI. No, it's part of the fabric of that flag right behind your head, Ken.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I've got audience favorite Bobby Jones back on. He's a former Navy commander, current president of Vets for Responsible Leadership, which did incredible work in the 24 election cycle, actually moved the needle in some key races. Bobby, we're going to talk about something today that I don't think we've talked about on this show, which is money. And if the Democratic Party leadership isn't going to take the fight to Trump the way it needs to be taken to Trump, it's going to fall to organizations like Vets for Responsible Leadership, like the other smaller organizations out there that are at the tip of the spear, doing the hard work, the counterpunching, but they need to be supported. Tell me about VFRL, what you got planned, and what you need.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back on, Ken. I tell you right now, this has been very surprising. You know, before November 5th, you had many organizations, many donors that were fighting to stop Donald Trump and his administration from being reelected, and with good reason. They pretty much knew that Project 2025 was not some showpiece, but it was the actual game plan. And since the election, we have seen, in my humble opinion, a capitulation to what's happening. I mean, every nominee that this man has put up for the Senate has been approved so far, with no hard stop. But most importantly, the voices, the powerful voices of, legacy media, talk, this, that, and the other, it's been soft. The money that was raised prior to for the Harris campaign to oppose these things has dried up. VFRL, to be completely honest, we're operating on a shoestring budget just to keep the lights on. But at the same time, every day, every other day, every week, we're sending out stuff saying, hey, pay attention to what this man is doing. He is literally walking down the playbook of Project 2025. And so, people who can speak up have not been able to speak up due to the lack of funds. But most importantly, there's a general malaise by our elected leaders to step up and do something about it. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about everybody. You have the Jasmine Crockett's, the Senator Slotkins, who have been very vocal and are asking, where's the rest of the cavalry? But right now, with the moves that this man has made, he's done two things that jump out. And everybody's focusing on the Department of Defense and this, that, and the other. He is single-handedly ripping apart the oversight apparatus of the federal government. All of the inspector generals that he just fired, which require, by the way, a 30-day notice, gone. Suspending every basic piece of the federal budget by decree. That's ridiculous. That's not even, I don't think, constitutional in many respects. But most importantly, everything that he is couching as opposition to cultural things like DEI and this, that, and the other is happening. And there is no real pushback for this. And this is dangerous. This is real dangerous, because if everything continues the way it's going this time next year, you're looking at a completely checklist system of government that is centered around the chief executive, which is not what the founding fathers intended at all. So the lack of money, the lack of funds, the lack of voices against what's happening here in just the first week and a half is terrifying. Those that don't understand why it's terrifying, go read a history book. Look at Germany in 1933. Look at Italy before that. Look at all of these things that are happening that strips oversight and basically checks any type of hard stop against a naked aggression to gain power. So that's where we are right now.
The law itself hasn't been a check. It seems like the strategy of the Trump administration, and we war gamed this out time and again, anticipating this kind of thing. Their approach is push through these EOs, these executive orders, fire AGs illegally without 30 days notice, and dare the courts to defy us. And if the courts do stand up and say that's illegal or unconstitutional, we've always got J.D. Vance invoking Jackson's threat to the court when he said the court has rendered its opinion, let them enforce it.
Let them enforce it. Right.
There is nothing more lawless than that, than not just defying the law, but defying the Supreme Court when it says you've broken the law.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ken, because we are not students of history. This generation of Americans have completely pushed history aside. A lot of that's by design. A lot of that is based on educational policy, because when you know history, you know what happens. What you just said, Andrew Jackson, that led directly to the Trail of Tears.
Yes, it did.
And one of the biggest genocidal episodes in American history, because the Supreme Court ruled that those native populations in the state that I live in, Georgia, was right. And they said the hell with it. And so the party of law and order, the party of rules, have thrown that to the wayside in less than a week. 1,600, pardons for a violent insurrection that happened on the steps of the Capitol building. Let me once again say this to people. The only other time that happened was when the British marched on Washington in the War of 1812. There's only 2 times that's happened. And so when you think about this, we allow all of those violent, let's be clear, violent perpetrators, violent insurrectionists, because that's what they were. They're not hostages. They were being held accountable for their actions. And so at VFRL, we talk about character in leadership. We talk about ethics in leadership. When you do something, you're going to be held accountable. That's part of having character. And the fact that this man just blanket pardoned, didn't even go through and try to filter out the most violent. And he was directly asked that by a reporter. And he's like, well, we'll look into it. What is there to look into? You already let them out. They've been on social media talking about they're going to buy guns, this, that, and the other. Their rights of arms restored. Meanwhile, someone convicted of having a certain amount of marijuana on them will never have those rights. Yeah. And he quickly pivoted like, well, their murderers are going free. What does that have to do with you being the president of the United States, getting rid of 1,600 insurrectionists, to the point where a few of them even realized that was wrong. They did the crime. They should do the time.
Yeah. So we just had Pam Hemphill on, the one of maybe the only one, perhaps one of 2 insurrectionists who said, I don't want that pardon. That's a slap in the face to every Capitol police officer who defended the Capitol against people like me that day. I wish there were more people like Pam Hemphill. Sometimes it takes a 70-year-old woman to remind people what courage looks like, though. And to the point about the violence of these insurrections, we already have example 1 of many more to follow of an insurrectionist who was stopped in a traffic incident, pulled a gun on a cop, and is now dead. These are not good people.
No. And here's the thing. We cannot be selective in how we apply the law. That has been the biggest issue when you look at domestic tranquility, how one group of people, that a lot of them look like me, are subjected to a different set of rules than everybody else. Do you think this helps change that narrative? It does not. And the other piece of this too is, if you're supposedly backing the blue, why on God's green earth would you put 1,600 proven violent insurrectionists back on the street where, like you said, with that traffic stop, they're now being put at more danger than they already are? Make it make sense to me, those that defend these pardons. You can't be both. Either you're for law and order or you're not.
Well, what's amazing is 10 days ago, they were saying this would never happen. J.D.
Yep.
Vance said it's
Yep.
obvious we won't pardon or
Everybody.
commute the
Right.
sentences of violent people. 2 days before they were handed down, I think 2 days, might have been 3, Tom Tillis, senator from North Carolina, said, of course not. There's no way. Crickets now.
Are you talking about the same Tom Tillis that said, I'm going to review the statement of Pete Hegseth's former sister-in-law to make sure that he was not a domestic abuser, and then proceeded to vote for him after looking at it? That same Tom Tillis?
Reassured this woman that her doing an incredibly brave thing and speaking out about the lack of character of the person who's now going to run the Department of Defense, that she would be protected, that her words would carry weight with fellow senators. He threw them out the window.
Look,
he threw her testimony out the window.
I'm not trying to get everybody alarmist, to be an alarmist for everybody, but I'm just going to be very honest. In the first week of the Trump administration, right, every executive order that man signed created more division. Nothing unified the American people. It was divide, 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 divide. Either you're with me or you are against me, straight up. And as he did that, he rolled the clock back of American progress. Now, the DEI thing about training in the military, the Tuskegee Airman thing, it was the backlash of trying to remove the Tuskegee Airmen from Air Force history was so bad that Senator Katie Britt down in Alabama, where Tuskegee is, had to come out and make a bold statement, something that I've never seen her do on behalf of people of color before, ever. And then Pete Hegseth jumps on Twitter and is like, yeah, we're going to do that. You're missing the point, Pete. You don't get to pick and choose what contributions in American military history should be taught and not taught. You teach all of it. It's a slap in the face. My wife's grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman, so this is real personal for me, okay? And I got to know that man very well before he passed away. The amount of crap that he went through trying to love a country that wouldn't love him back, and you're going to sit there and tell me, well, that's DEI. No, it's part of the fabric of that flag right behind your head, Ken. And the fact that we're even having this conversation, the USS Mason or the Buffalo Soldiers or any of this, all of a sudden has to be subject to the scrutiny of a man that made 04 after 20 plus years of service and 2 Bronze Stars. That's all? Really? Me and you are more qualified to run the Department of Defense than he is. But he gets the final say in that. It's absolutely insulting. And you're talking about a group of people. When I mean group of people, I'm talking about every, from Black, Hispanic to transgender, all these groups that you need desperately to fill the military force right now. Because I hate to break it to you, this whole mentality of all the guys in the military are like John Wayne in the 40s in the movies, that is a bunch of bullshit. That is not the case whatsoever. African Americans serve at a higher goddamn proportion of their population makeup for this country. Same with Latinos. You don't have a military without us. And now you want to sit there and say, yeah, but everything that you went through, yeah, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to highlight that. Don't give you any hope or motivation to move forward, right? This is ridiculous. Or women in combat roles. My wife's she's a female Navy veteran, an Annapolis graduate too. And the fact that this is even a conversation in 2025, based on the contributions from the Revolutionary War that women have given to Americans and American military, is asinine to me.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break to say thank you to everyone who supports this show via Patreon. We're adding exclusive content every week there, so if you haven't signed up yet, head over to patreon.com/Ken Harbaugh. Every single cent we get through Patreon goes back into this show, whether it's researching topics like the piece we recently did on the U.S. Army's counter-fascism training during World War II, or my reporting trips to Ukraine to show what that country is doing to defend its democracy. These episodes can't happen without your support. I'm deeply honored that so many of you have pitched in. If you've been waiting, now would be a great time. We've got another reporting trip to Ukraine coming up and other ambitious projects in the works. We're all in this together. Thanks for everything. I had no idea you have a relative who was a Tuskegee Airman. My grandfather flew B-17s in World War II, and I guarantee you, that he would say if he needed an escort, he wanted it to be red tails.
Yep.
And I think there is a logic to that, which is that if you survived as a black aviator through training in World War II, you had to be the best.
Yes.
You had to be better
Yes.
than everybody
Yes.
else.
Yes.
And I think that holds for, in so many cases, for women in the military today.
Yes.
There is such a spotlight on minorities who are breaking that ceiling time and time again, that they have to be better than everybody else. And I would rather have, if I was just randomly picking, I would rather have a female wingman like Amy McGrath than some rando dude who went through with all the advantages I went through with.
I'll take it a step further. You know, I heard people like Charlie Kirk talk about, if I see a black pilot flying a airline, you know, I'm kind of concerned. I want something different. Well, pause right there. My brother's a black military pilot, United States Air Force Academy class of 2005. My brother flew the U-2. You know how many few pilots fly that plane? They give you a number you keep for the rest of your life. If you were so lucky that my brother is flying a plane that you're in, count and pray to whatever God you pray to, because you got the absolute best. See, the thing people like him, the thing like Hegseth is sitting there talking about, they're ignoring the almost over 300 years of qualified people who look like me, qualified women, qualified minorities who were told no simply because of their appearance. See, we don't talk about that part. The ultimate DEI, the way they're framing it, has been unqualified white men that have been put to the forefront, like Pete Hegseth.
Pete Hegseth is a DEI hire.
He is, compared to what he's following. A 4-star general in our previous Secretary of Defense, and before him another. 4-star regimental Army commanders. And this guy was an 04 after 20 years, which tells me there's some failure to promote somewhere. Yeah. If you know anything about the military, those of us that are in, we know 20 plus years, just an 04. What's wrong? Now we give you the keys to the Pentagon. Forget your personal failings. Forget the adultery. Forget the freaking drunken and the sexual assault claims. Forget the running 2 different organizations into the ground financially. We're going to give you a multi-billion-dollar goddamn budget, as well as the most powerful weapons in the world, with the most trained, capable military in the world, made up by every piece of tapestry the American public has, and tell you need to run it. Even though you said women shouldn't be here, even though you said any contributions by minorities shouldn't be talked about. How are you a unifier?
The deal he seems to have made with the Senate Republican caucus is, if you give me the Department of Defense, I'll stop drinking. Yes. I don't think that should be.
That's not how that works.
That should not be the bar.
the carrot and the stick. Oh, if you give me the job, I'll stop doing it.
That's right.
You had how many years before? But most importantly, here's the thing: the most trusted institution America has been its military, right? And the argument I heard is the military has been politicized. Not really, but it has been now. Yeah. If you are transgender in the military, right? What are you supposed to do here? What are you supposed to think? If you are being told, hey, black guy, the stuff that's been done before, no one cares. It's not important. It's DEI. Never mind, your great grandfather serving food on a ship and then having to don a flak jacket and a freaking hard hat and go man a gun in the Battle of Atlantic or World War II, whatever. Your contributions aren't as cool or as important. You know what I'm saying? Why do we have to teach this? Because when you have a movie like Flag of Our Fathers by Clint Eastwood and you don't see not one person of color on the beaches of Iwo Jima, even though they were there pulling people and saving lives, that's why you teach it. And then come back to segregation after stopping imperialism and stopping fascism. Loving a country that still to this day, many will argue, does not love us back. That's why you teach it. To motivate people to move forward, not try to reverse the clock. Are you kidding me? Women are taking technical majors in colleges at a 2-to-1 ratio to guys, but you don't want them in your military. Who's going to operate your nuclear subs? Who's going to operate those high-tech radar systems? It's not something you can just snap your fingers and have happen because you think it looks cool and you want square-jawed, crew-cut, blonde-eyed, blue-haired, whatever. It doesn't work that way. You want to talk about quality? You want to talk about merit? You want to talk about people who are going to actually make it a career? Newsflash, it's not you to live in the upper class that you think you're appealing to. It never has been. And so my problem is these positions, whether you're talking Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, freaking head of the FBI, whatever you want to pick, they're supposed to unify the American people around a mission. And in the first 10 days of this administration, what we have gotten has actually been divisiveness. The one common theme, divisiveness. How are we supposed to come together when an actual real crisis happens? That may be self-inflicted, by the way, with some of these policies. How's that supposed to work?
Yep. Let's bring it back to VFRL. Please make the pitch. Tell us what you need. We'll put a link in the show notes.
VFRL, so Veterans Responsible Leadership. Our main focus is helping, supporting, being advocates of people of character in our leadership positions, state, local, federal, because policies, that's politics. That comes and goes. But electing people who I don't know haven't been convicted felons, electing people that I don't know have not been accused of sexual assault. These are the type of individuals that we're looking for. We're looking also to support people who have put it on the line as veterans, where you don't have to question their love of the country. You just look up their bio, their actions. And let me say this very clearly. Actions show that they love this country. So we're supporting people like Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, who's going to run for governor, and Spanberger, Representative Spanberger, who's going to run for governor. CIA agent and pilot, combat pilot, back to back. They've put it on the line before they were even known, right? Those are the type of people we want to help, but we need funding to put out our social media, to put out ads and stuff like that, because the real issue here is counter messaging. The messaging that has been put out here in the last really 3 years, the whole election cycle, has been negative and a lot of lies and a lot of misconceptions. And so what do you have to do? You have to counter that. You have to put out proper information, tell people where to go to find it, show people how and why these policies affect you. It's interesting. I served in the military 26 years, and I've slept in some pretty rough places on this planet, but I never thought the fight of my life would have to take place within the borders of the United States. I never. But guess what? The oath that me and you took said all enemies, foreign and domestic.
And
foreign and
domestic.
Expire. And it doesn't expire. So I'll be your huckleberry. We'll be your huckleberry, to quote Doc Holliday, because the way I see it, what did I do all those deployments for if you allow this type of stuff to happen? Yeah. Where kids are afraid to go to school because it's not just about policy, it's about creating terrorism and fear. Fear, power. Since when is that the American way? We fight when we have to. We protect always, but we are not the ones that are supposed to inspire fear. We're supposed to inspire greatness.
Yep.
And right now, there is nothing great with what's happening in America so far.
Last thing, you got a new podcast. Tell us about. Yeah. I'm not even gonna spoil the name of it. It's great, but tell us about it.
The podcast is on Valor Media Network, and it's called the G-Dunk Show. So it's me. It's me and the founder of VFRL, Dan Barkoff. So Dan and I are classmates out of the Naval Academy, and he went and became a Navy SEAL, badass, and then he got bored and became a trauma surgeon in an emergency room in New England. Why? I don't know, because he was bored. I went and did surface warfare and became a commanding officer of a Riverine squadron. But between the both of us, we traveled the entire world. We've seen the best of humanity, the worst of humanity. But we come from two totally different backgrounds. He's a Mainer that was raised out in the woods and stuff like that. I'm from right outside of I'm south side of Atlanta, Georgia, completely different cultures. And we basically come together every week and discuss things that we're seeing, try to educate people on what especially military stuff is happening. We talk a little sports. We talk a little about any and everything. And we try to highlight the commonality of America today and America yesteryear. So going forward, the first thing people want to do is look and see where we can connect with one another instead of ripping ourselves apart. Because I'm telling you now, Ken, it's tiring. It gets old just being divided all the time. I'm tired, man. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. We're so much better than this.
We are. And better. I honestly believe, and I'm going to maintain this till the day I die, that the main problem in America today is is communication. It's information.
Mm-hmm.
It's not character. There are good people
I agree.
who didn't know better.
I
You
agree.
see a lot of FAFO effect going around right now.
Yep.
So if
Yep.
we can communicate, if we can make your show a hit, if we can get VFRL the resources it needs to do its job, I think we can claw our way out of this.
No, it's going to be a process. But the thing that I would tell everybody when having conversations that, to be honest, are long overdue, right? Show each other some grace. So show each other some grace, because just being mad, like, this is what you thought, okay, what's that going to get us right now? Nothing. We are in the middle of the battle. You got to keep and hold your water and listen to each other and say, this is why we think this way. But at some point, we have to say, what is America? Is it this, where we have someone that rules by executive order and no one wants to stand up to it? Or do we have oversight? Do we have inclusivity? Do we sit there and say, hey, we can get a lot further with the word and instead of the word or? Because that's what it is in my mind. That's all it is.
Thanks, Bobby. As always, appreciate you coming on. Let's do this often.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
We really were the top guns of the Air Force.
This is Brigadier General Enoch Woodhouse II, one of the last remaining members of the famed Tuskegee Airmen, an all-black Air Force unit that became vital in World War II.
And people say, well, Woody, how could you be dissatisfied being in an all-black unit? Simple. They were the best.
They escorted and protected bombers during World War II, Woodhouse saying they had the best safety record in the Air Force.
We all did more than we were entitled to do.
During the war, Woodhouse was in a segregated basic training unit.
I was commissioned in 1946 at 19. Now, in 46, the war was over.
He says every African American, regardless of education or ability, was designated to Squadron F.
And F's sole mission was housekeeping.
Woodhouse saying a study came out during that time characterizing black youth in combat as docile.
The main thing was we lacked physical prowess.
Yet it was their physical prowess that made them heroes in World War II. Over the weekend, steps were taken to remove teaching materials about the airmen to comply with President Trump's DEI ban in the military.
I was a little shocked at first, but it didn't bother me when things simmered down. You know, I'm just looking at the whole perspective.
The Air Force has since done an about-face, returning the footage. Woodhouse has no concerns, calling it just a blip in history.
You can't change history. People can make a statement, but you know, being spiritual, the truth will out.
Hey everyone, it's Ken. I need a quick favor. We are launching Valor Media Network, a new YouTube channel to highlight positive role models who will take on the toxic influencers of the so-called manosphere. Think Joe Rogan. We've got some great hosts already lined up. You'll recognize some of them like Jason Kander, Dan Barkoff, and Bobby Jones. And we've got more coming on board soon. Please click on the link below to Valor Media Network's YouTube page and hit that subscribe button. These early signups make all the difference. Thank you so much.